There are many topics that I could cover this month, but there was something that crossed my mind amidst my struggle as I lay down trying to figure out, well, what can I talk about for these upcoming few weeks? And there was one thing that seems so high concept that I struggled to figure out how to translate, articulate that catharsis that I found. And let me give you some background as to what that struggle was. For a long time, I struggled with how religion affects society as the information age has come into being and has matured over time. Matured to the point to where information is so free flowing that misinformation has joined that saturation, that abundance. And so when I started to recognize that there were varying levels of deception across society when it comes to, belief systems, whether that's a belief in a person, an organization, or a tradition, I tried to reconcile, well, how does that affect the daily human experience? And in terms of our accountability, oh, how should we live? Where should we go? Do we believe the influencer? Do we believe the self-help guru? Do we believe our spiritual leaders? What about the self? And, I let that idea drift away because I recognized that the epiphany I had gained was always going to be a part of me. It was that balancing point. But at the same time, because it's become so subconscious to me, I needed to figure out a way of translating that out to the people, to the world, to cement it as a part of my principles. And that epiphany is this: everyone is responsible for their own path, even in ignorance, even in vulnerability. And that's a very challenging position to take because, well, let's go into some background. When someone offers their experiences or their beliefs to another person, that is just a unique opinion, a unique status, a unique story to them. It doesn't mean that's an instruction for you to follow 100%. That is something that they experienced, that they, feel that there is immense value and that other people gain equal value because it is a translation of that experience that could become instruction. However, it doesn't mean that the person's life experience and their learnings are somehow your own. Because what happens is that if you make it your own, you remove the opportunity of yourself to learn something. Whether you just follow it verbatim like a follower without question, or you seek to test it. You test the experience, you test the instructions that someone or something has given you, and you look to find your own insight. And the difference between the two, whether you're being a questionless follower versus a questioning experimenter, is a difference of accountability. And so one of the biggest challenges I've noticed with how a lot of influencers, self-help gurus, etc., they gain this mindless following that doesn't seek to experiment enough, but when they do, they end up not really falling into a followership to that, leader, that spiritual self-help, business, military, whatever, because at the end of the day, they start to recognize that their own insights are unique to their overall experience, their own life journey, and their experimentation, their learnings, their epiphany is what matters in the end, is what characterizes their individual principles, their life, and no one else can own that but themselves. So whenever you have a disagreement with someone around you, you might want to ask yourself, are they taking ownership over their experiences? Well, if they are, that's great, because that means that whatever they are passionate about, whatever they decide to do, whether they're a Christian, Muslim, a fan of World of Warcraft, a fan of Final Fantasy XIV, whether they're Republican, whether they're Democrat, as long as they take personal ownership and don't chalk it up to some leader that they follow, to some identity that they're defending, then you have a person that is cementing their life journey to that path, and there is no one else that can take responsibility of it aside from themselves. And when you have that clear delineation, then you can have a clearer, responsible approach in discourse or in conflict, because at the end of the day, it's not about absolute alignment. It's about being able to progress your own accountability over your life that doesn't always have to be shared with anyone else. And every so often, maybe we'll have friends along the way, but those friends are never guaranteed, and they may not be there forever. Same thing with enemies. Enemies can turn into allies, and allies can turn into enemies. But that's why it is important to see things systemically, because in a system, nothing is ever promised. There's always an ebb and flow to things. And the only real comfort in a systemic view of things is that things change inevitably. And as long as we are firm with ourselves, then as the world changes around us, we can ride our personal boat rather than someone else's boat, hoping that that other person's boat can help us. And, that's the challenge. If we're riding someone else's boat and it capsizes due to their leadership or their change of heart, all we have is ourselves. We can try to rely on our allies, our friends, whomever we found along the way, but that's not always a guarantee. So building our own self, our identity, a recognition of our journey, that's the most important thing that we can do for ourselves.